Hello, and welcome to Controversial Killers, the podcast where we talk about some of the most gruesome and spine-chilling serial. My name is Kaylee Strait.
I'm Sophia Flores. And today, Kaylee will be telling you a little bit of summary about Jack the Ripper.
So, from August 7th to September 10th in 1888, Jack the Ripper, he had terrorized the Whitechapel district in London. We will be talking about all American serial killers, but since Jack the Ripper was one of the very first serial killers, we'd like to tell you a little bit about him as well. But he killed at least 5 prostitutes and he mutilated their bodies. They were usually all killed and laid out in the same way, usually around the same time at night too. Many believe that he had a knowledge of human anatomy because he was able to lay out everything well and know where he needed to hit them for them to be dead. But yeah, there's that.
Do you think that he had studies of the human body?
Yeah. I think he did have a knowledge in anatomy, and I definitely think that. So from hearing that summary about Jack the Ripper, I know that you don't know a whole lot about that serial murderer. Do you think it's kind of crazy how they never found out who it actually was? And
I think it is crazy. I mean, it could have been anybody.
Yeah, and with the resources we have today, we can pretty much do anything, and we can pretty much find out who someone is pretty quickly. So
yeah, with all the technology that we have nowadays, we can definitely find out.
Yeah. So next we will be summarizing H.H. Holmes. We're just going to go through most of the serial killers that we're going to review over the time that we have, and there's going to be a few. So the next one is H.H. Holmes, and Holmes was born as Herman Webster Mudgett in New Hampshire on May 16, 1861, to Levi Horton Mudgett and Theodore Page Price. Later attempts to find Holmes into the patterns seen in modern serial killers have described him torturing animals and suffering from abuse at the hands of a violent father, but contemporary and eyewitnesses' accounts of his childhood do not provide proof of either H.H. Holmes was known best for his murder castle. Later in 2017, amid allegations, Holmes had in fact escaped execution. Due to his coffin being contained in cement, his body was found not to have decomposed normally. His clothes were almost perfectly preserved, and his mustache was found to be intact. The body was positively identified as that of being Holmes, with his teeth. Holmes was then reburied. So, I think that's what I find pretty cool about H.H. Holmes is that they figured out that it was actually him, again, after they dug him up and did a teeth test just to see if that was him. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about is, what causes serial murder. And one of the things that it had mentioned was their tough childhood. So maybe that could have had an impact on him, but we'll talk about that more later. The next person we will be summarizing is Ed Gein. He was born on August 27, 1906, and his name was Ed Theodore Gein. He was the son of Augusta and George Phillip. They lived on a farm in La Crosse, Wisconsin, in a small town known as Plainfield. Ed's parents were very cruel to him. His dad was an abusive drunk, and his mom would instill a pathological fear of women and sex inside his head. Even though his mom verbally abused him, he idolized her. For Gein, he started to grow obsessions and hatred after his family had died. All of Gein's family died in a 5-year time frame, and he was left at the isolated farm by himself, which is then when all of this started. Once he was left alone for a while, he made a shrine of sorts for his mother. Then his obsession with his mom grew worse over time, even digging up bodies that he would find in local cemeteries.
So does that mean, I'm sorry, but, when you go back and he said that he had, this obsession with his mom, does that mean, he was falling in love with her? Or was he just,
No, he, idolized her in a sense that being, oh, this stuff is wrong, but, this could be interesting.
Even after she would verbally abused him and stuff like that.
Yeah, he would dig up the bodies and then make certain parts so that he could be wearing the woman, because he wanted to be his mom.
Oh, okay.
So he idolized her to the point to where he wanted to be his mom.
He wanted to be her.
Yes. So next, Sophia will be reading a serial killer that has never been caught, and it's a Zodiac serial killer. And you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. The Zodiac was interesting in the fact that he was never caught. He killed teenagers, usually couples, and sent the newspaper letters to taunt the police in town of San Francisco.
Which is pretty crazy because most of the time they try to stay on the low, but he was purposefully taunting them, wanting them to...
Yeah, and that's just a really big risk factor that he took. He, risked
and he's still never been caught.
He hasn't been caught.
That's why I think he's one of, I don't want to say the coolest, but one of the most interesting, intriguing serial killers. So the next one, he is actually still alive to this day, and he has his own website saying that he has found God now. But his name is David Berkowitz, and he personally had nothing like personal against anybody, but he just killed for the sake of killing. But I also read on his website that like he felt like he was like bullied in high school, and that could have been a factor why he wanted to do this. But he was a distant killer, so that means like he would shoot them, and as a child he enjoyed it very much, to set fires, and towards the end he killed 6 and wounded 7. And then in this whole world of serial killers, there always has to be a homosexual one, right?
Yeah.
And there's been a few, like John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer, which are like 2 of the main ones, and they were pretty intriguing too. John Wayne Gacy was known as the clown killer. He would dress up as a clown and go to kids' parties. That was one of his jobs. He was born on March 17th, 1942, and he had a dominating father, an alcoholic, often disappearing when getting drunk. In 1975, the man started to kill. He killed at least 33 young men and boys aged 15 to 21. John Wayne Gacy was unique because of his sexual orientation, which was homosexual, and he liked by many before he was liked well before he was known as a serial killer. He buried 29 of his 33 bodies killed under his crawl space in his one-bedroom home. He would throw lime on the bodies to help decompose the bodies faster. But like many serial killers, Gacy became cocky and overconfident, eventually getting caught. When the police officer came over to have dinner with Gacy, smelling an autopsy smell. Then Gacy was then prosecuted against. After his crimes, he was sentenced to death row. Gacy died, and then his clown paintings he painted that should have gone for $1 went for $3,000 because Gacy gained a status. So like Gacy, is Ted Bundy too. They wanted to be known. They didn't care if they had someone recording their trials. They wanted the world to know about them, and that was one big thing about Ted Bundy. He wanted everything documented.
And it wasn't like a good type of fame. It was like a bad type of fame. Like they just wanted to be known around the world. For him,
but for Ted Bundy, these girls went crazy because they thought he was handsome and all of that. Even though he was sitting there killing multiple women, they still like he got so many like letters of girls like and proposing to him.
Yeah, I feel like his looks made it more easier to get a young girl to like help him out and stuff.
Yeah, like when he would like trick them into saying, "Hey, my arm's broken. Can you help me carry myself to my car?" And he looked like a normal civilian. Anne Rule wrote a book even called The Stranger Beside Me, like saying that.
Yeah.
She never would have thought that her friend Ted would have been the Ted that was killing all these women. But Sophia's gonna read us a summary on Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy appeared to be anything but a serial killer. He was born on November 24th, 1946. He was responsible for killing a total of 30 confirmed women, and some estimated he could have killed at least 100. He is also one of the best-known serial killers. He killed mainly college girls that looked familiar to his ex-girlfriend named Elizabeth. One of many techniques Bundy used was when luring his victims to him was saying that he was injured or needed help taking something to his car.
And if you think about it, that was pretty smart of Ted to come up with, like, my arm's broken or my car is dead, or someone, like, with the one girl that actually escaped from him when he was trying to capture her. He said that someone had been trying to break into a car, but they didn't see anything, but he said that he had to take her down to the station anyways to get a report on it. But eventually she was like, she felt that gut feeling. Yeah. So then she was able to get away, and that's one of the girls that got away out of many of the ones Ted Bundy killed, which I found very interesting that he used like little things like that to lure victims. Right,
and like back in the
and he went to big crowds too. He went to big crowds to do it too, and like some serial killers, they do it in the night. He was doing it in plain sight in the day.
Mm-hmm. Like at the beach and stuff, people said that they saw him.
Yeah,
they saw his face
at the festival,
and he did not. Like, he didn't care to get caught.
So another homosexual serial killer named Jeffrey Dahmer. He was known as the Milwaukee Monster, and he was born on May 21st, 1960. He took the lives of 17 males between 1978 and 1991. Over the course of more than 13 years, Dahmer sought out men, mostly African American, at gay bars, malls, bus stops, etc. He lured them home with the promise of money or sex and gave them alcohol laced with drugs before strangling them to death. He would then engage in sexual acts with the corpses before dismembering them and disposing of them. often keeping their skulls or genitals as souvenirs. He frequently took photos of his victims at various stages of the murder process so he could recollect each act afterward and relive the experience. So with many serial killers, I find it odd that they would take photos of their victims through the process of them killing them. Because it's not just Dahmer, like, multiple people did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just find that odd. And then also keeping them to relive the experience, which is, like, masturbation.
Right.
Which is odd, too, that they would... It's just odd that they find a sexual pleasure through killing someone or looking at a dead body.
Yeah, and they like the excitement. They like...
Everything
like
that comes
the dominance
with it.
that they have toward, like, with somebody.
Yeah. So, what I find very intriguing is one of the first, like, female serial killers. She wasn't the first, but one of the most, like, well-known, which was Aileen Wuornos, and she grew up in Rochester, Michigan, growing up in a nearby Troy area to the south. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about her as well?
Yeah, Wuornos had a deeply troubled childhood. Eileen's father killed himself while serving time in prison for child molestation. Her mother walked out on Wuornos and her older brother Keith, leaving them with their grandparents. Yet their grandmother was an alcoholic and their grandfather was a violent man that beat on her. Wuornos spent her teen years in the house, but then later dropped out of high school and became a prostitute. Wuornos allegedly killed 7 people in 1989 through 1990. Acting like a hitchhiking prostitute, she murdered 7 moderately aged men, motorcycle drivers, and left their bodies along the throughways of Florida and southern Georgia. Some estimate that she may have slaughtered an 8th driver in a similar period.
So one thing I find about her too, she used like her being a prostitute. They all have their own like special like. Some of them say that they're just like a gay man and they just want to pay you for the sex. Ted Bundy said that he needed help putting something in his car because his arm was broken. Aileen said that she was a prostitute. Like, all of these were still like that, but it was crazy that she'd say she was a prostitute when she was raped as a child. I wonder if that left a overall, like, experience on her saying, oh, I'm raped, so men are, like, POSs, which means, like, I deserve to kill some of them because if someone raped me, then there's other men that rape other girls. And I think that may have been a motive for her, that if all these other girls are getting raped and I got raped, then maybe that's the right thing for her to do.
Yeah, that men deserve their consequence.
But that didn't make it right in any means. But I could see, like, what was kind of going through her mind at that point, and maybe that's what she was thinking. But we never know. So the next serial killer is Richard Ramirez, and he was known as the Night Stalker. He killed 13 people and attempted to kill 5 others. He was a home invader, and he would rape the woman he found within the house. In an interview with Richard Ramirez, he said if the doors were unlocked, that meant he was invited in. Richard Ramirez was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. Unfortunately, Ramirez was subjected to abuse by his father, and Ramirez was abused even after experiencing 2 head injuries after having frequent epileptic seizures at age 5. Later on, Ramirez became close with Miguel, his older cousin, but later Miguel was a bad influence on young Ramirez. He would torture Vietnam women and showed Ramirez the pictures. Everything turned when Miguel shot his wife in front of the 13-year-old Richard Ramirez. From then on, Ramirez turned from a scared, abused young boy into a hardened, sullen man.
That is crazy. I don't think, but, like, I know that being 13 and seeing somebody, like, you're related to shooting somebody else right in front of you, and you're just, like, innocent and 13 years old and you don't know what's going on.
Definitely change your point of view.
That will definitely, like, it's amazing. But it's, like, amazing, like, not, like, in a good way.
It's amazing how
like,
something that bad can turn
to
something so much more bad.
Yeah.
So that was the summary of all of the serial killers we will be talking about during our podcast. And this was the first part of telling you just a little bit about the serial killers. So if you thought one of them was interesting, then you should come back and watch that podcast after they are done. And we will see you later. My name is Kaylee Straight.
I'm Sophia Flores.
And you listen to Controversial Killers.